It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulsen and former Commanders beat reporter Craig Hoffman.
What's up? What's happening? Welcome in. It is Take Command live from Indianapolis in part. Logan is in Ashburn and will be here tomorrow, of course, the day that I leave. But I am here in Indy, and sitting next to me is the one man in NFL media who can make me put in hair product. Logan, it is Trevor Sikkema from Pro Football Focus. How about that for an introduction, my friend?
That was good. I appreciate it. Not a lot of heavy product going into the hair, honestly. Just, a couple of years ago, I figured out, why women.
You told me the trick last year.
What was it? What did I say?
You got to blow dry it.
That's what I'm saying. I did for many years. I was like, how do people get their hair to stay a certain way? And then somebody's like, dude, you just blow dry it. And you know what? Turns out the right.
You can't. I don't know. People listening to the audio. There's no product in your hair right now.
No, there is a small amount of product. Right. We have a small amount of little.
But that's just a hole what the hair dryer does,
paste.
Logan. This man changed my life last year with that trip. Or that
it does
tip.
Look good.
I mean, today got the hotel hair dryer.
King.
Little bit of product
there
just
it
to
is.
hold it.
There it is.
Can't be looking like a bum next to this dude.
We're evolving.
All right. So with that, the hair stuff out of the way, Trevor is, of course, the lead NFL draft analyst for Pro Football Focus, and we're going to talk NFL draft. So, Logan, where do you want to start with Trevor? Because obviously the Commander, this conversation was very different last year. We're talking quarterbacks nonstop, the number 2 in the draft, as we've been talking about, and we'll continue to talk about. Very different situation at 29. So where do you want to start with Trevor and exchanging notes here?
Yeah, I just think maybe the best question for the fans is like, where are you at? Because everyone uses the PFF, draft simulator, and they see your rankings. That's pretty much your deal on there. Where are you at with your rankings? Where does the Senior Bowl fit into those rankings? And how does an event like the Combine affect those rankings? And I guess the third part would be like, who are you feeling good about for the Commanders at 29?
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about these events, they're a lot of fun. First and foremost, because you get to know these players a little bit more, even if it's just in the podium sessions. Like there are a couple of guys, edge rushers, which I know is a position that the Commanders are kind of taking a hard look at. We're sitting here this morning, and Donovan Ezaraku from Boston College. I mean, I was so impressed with him and his podium and just how he approaches the game. Somebody asked him, "Hey, what do you think separates you in a really good edge rushing class?" And he's like, "It's my mentality, like how I approach the game, how I go about pass rushing, how I understand. It's a game of setting guys up a certain way." And he broke down, somebody asked him about a ghost move because he likes using a ghost move as a pass rusher, and he's like, dude, you can't just kind of like throw that all willy-nilly. Like you got to set that up. Like it's got to be with purpose. You got to do a couple of different things first to make sure that the offensive linemen are going to kind of be sitting back in their stance or open up their chest a little bit. And just an answer like that, just off the top of his head, you could tell that he studies the game. He knows the game as well. I mean, Jalen Walker as well, the linebacker / edge rusher from Georgia, was fantastic at his podium too. So like just listening to guys and who they are underneath the helmet or between the ears, if you will, I think goes a long way into these events. But when it comes to evaluation, I think that the Senior Bowl, the Combine, a lot of it is you want to be checking the things that you've already seen in their game tape. Like it's new environments, it's different environments. For example, like for an edge rusher, if you're going to be a lighter speed rusher, and like James Pierce Jr., this is a great example, the edge rusher from Tennessee. He wins as a speed rusher. He wins as the first step. He attacks the outside shoulders consistently. He's always a threat to get around the edge and up the arc. We need you to test well. I need to see that in the 40-yard dash, the 10-yard split, more importantly, the broad jump, the vertical jump. Like I need to see that explosiveness. And if you could showcase that here as much as on your tape, then I go, okay, you're an athlete that can really just conjure that sort of explosiveness whenever you want. And I think that that's really important. So you want it to be, and the Senior Bowl is sort of the same way. How you win your reps at the Senior Bowl, how you might lose your reps at the Senior Bowl. That obviously you're putting the pads on, and it's a little bit more of a tangible thing because you're actually playing the game of football. But to me, it's a lot more of you're just trying to make sure what you have seen on film is not deceiving you, or they're not hiding any of your deficiencies by playing in a certain scheme or a certain defense or something like that. So I mentioned a couple of those edge rushers. Donovan Ezaraku, I think, is somebody who's a target for them if they want to go a little bit more heavy-handed. A guy like Nick Scourton from Texas A&M is somebody that I think about for the Washington Commanders. He talked a little bit about, hey, he didn't have as much production this year at Texas A&M versus what he had last year at Purdue. And he sort of went on to explain Purdue's defense for him. I'm sort of speaking as him here. He's like, it was very simple for me. I rushed from one side of the defensive line and they just told me to get after the quarterback. That's about it. And he said when he was at Texas A&M, it was a lot more versatile. They had him rushing from the left side, from the right side. They had him kick inside a little bit more to 3-technique defensive tackle. He said he learned how to become a much better, much more versatile run defender. And so, yeah, the stats took a step back, but he said he became more of a versatile player. So those are a handful of guys that just thinking about Washington there at the end of the first round, especially on the defensive line, since it's fresh in my mind, that I think is targets for him.
So before we get into more like specific guys and your evals on these guys, a question that I'm going to ask everybody that sits down here this week that I think is interesting, especially from your lens, is there anything that the way Washington built their team and had the success they had, anything that changes the way you think about the NFL's and finding success in it or team building? Because they were very clear with certain things that mattered a lot to them. And, you can mark that down as like political messaging or say like, oh, maybe that's something I should be considering more. And I'm curious how someone in your position looks at what Washington did, player acquisition, free agency, but especially for you in the draft, and goes, oh, maybe that's something that I should be thinking about.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing that pops into my head is just them drafting and how they played Mike Sainristil at the cornerback position. And it's just, this is a player who came in a smaller size. We're basically told, hey, he's just a slot cornerback at the NFL level, and look what he did this year. Okay, yeah, sure, it was a little bit out of necessity, but they were not afraid to move this guy to the outside. And that, to me, of course, it speaks to Sainristil's sort of like versatility and his ability as a football player, but it also speaks to his football character and how they were very willing to say, hey, I know you didn't play outside corner really much at all when you were at Michigan. We're going to ask you to do this. And they weren't afraid to ask him to do this because they had already done the due diligence during the draft process to know that if, stuff hit the fan and he really needed to play outside, that they were very comfortable doing that. So that's sort of the first example that comes into my head because I'm such a Dan Quinn guy. I love Dan Quinn. I thought he built great teams when he was in Atlanta. If we're being honest, probably should have won that Super Bowl when they got to the Super Bowl. So for all intents and purposes, you can call him a Super Bowl caliber sort of a head coach. And even when he was with the Dallas Cowboys, whether it was Deron Bland, whether it was Trayvon Diggs, I mean, like these guys were high impact players for him. And it was really because I think he puts them in those positions to succeed and empowers them in certain ways. So it's sort of a roundabout way to answer that question of, you look at like what the Detroit Lions are doing, for example, where over the last 2 to 3 drafts, remember they traded up and they drafted Jahmyr Gibbs at number 12.
Right.
Like, what are you doing? You can't do that. You can't trade up and draft a running back that high, or drafting Jack Campbell as high as they did, or Sam Laporta even. And you go, you can't do this. These aren't premium positions, and they're just drafting the right football players. And if you fast forward a little bit, 2-3 years down the road, you just have one of the best rosters in the NFL. That's the way that I sort of look at what Washington was able to do last year when they were in free agency, some of the initial roster turnover they had, and even how they approach the draft is, I just don't think that they're going to be afraid, or I don't think that they're going to pigeonhole themselves into thinking, oh, we have to have an edge rusher here or something like that. Like they're just going to pick the best football players for sure.
And so, yeah, talking about best football players, and this is something you talked about on your podcast, the NFL Stock Exchange podcast, is like,
Look at you plug in like a pro.
I listen to it. It's it's an awesome show. You know what I mean? So great way to get information. But you talk about how you have your evaluation, right? But you also are kind of in this weird space of also thinking about what a team's going to do. And so when you look at Washington, like, again, I think this is kind of piggybacking off Craig's question. Like, how do you see them selecting guys? Like, I think of, like, when I think of Washington, I see them looking for high character, good leadership qualities. Maybe the football upside isn't all the way there all the time. Mike Sainristil is maybe a bad example of that. But how do you kind of weigh that in your evaluation? And do you think Washington goes in a similar direction this year? Or like you're saying, did they just say, hey, this dude's a freak at the spot. We have a locker room and a culture that's established now. We can tolerate a player who's maybe not of the same kind of like team captain, 4-year starter that we were really prioritizing last year?
Well, I think first and foremost, you're always, no matter what team you are, you're always going to try to prioritize those guys, right? You want your entire football team to be made up of team captains that were all team captains when they were playing in college and things like that. Sometimes that's not always the case. Sometimes you get juniors, sometimes you get guys who were underclassmen and maybe their game's not as mature, or maybe they're not as mature as a person, but you hopefully feel good about the staff that you have around him to where you can draft any of these players that you think might be fits. I mean, when I look at the Commanders, it's a little bit tough because it is the first year for Dan Quinn. And so with so much sort of roster turnover from Rivera's guys to his guys last year, I think free agency is also going to tell us a lot about what this team wants to do structurally next season and beyond. Because right now I look at the Commanders and it's like, okay, I think this is a team that wants to win with 4 up front. I think they want to be an even front type of a team. Of course, like when you're a nickel, you're playing just 2 middle linebackers right behind them. But I feel like I felt as though they were pretty versatile in coverage last year, but I don't know if that was necessarily because it's like, okay, we're still getting guys in and out of the building that are going to be able to run our system, or if they did truly just want a lot of that versatility. Again, I think that as they sort of continue to build out their secondary, that's the part that when you ask like, okay, just specific Commanders targets for this team, that's what I really want to see from them. Are they going to lean more into, we're going to get man coverage corners on the outside, or are they going to be guys who are primarily more like off coverage type of players? You saw during his time when he was with the Dallas Cowboys, yeah, you could play some man coverage with him, but it was a lot of being able to play in off coverage, being able to hunt the football, like that kinds of stuff, that quarters coverage from their secondary. So that's a big area where I'm looking to sort of see what they're going to do in free agency, and that will be able to, I think, help answer the question better that you're asking of like, what are the types of players that they go for? High character, everybody wants high character, but I'm more interested to, over the next month, figure out what scheme are they leaning into more when it comes to a lot of those players that they're going to continue to build out their roster with.
So on the secondary front, it seems like they're all in on the Lattimore transaction they made. It's like, nope, we traded a third-round pick for that dude. We're going to make it work. He's going to be back. They have Sainristil still. I would think re-signing Chin is a high priority for them. And then they've got Quan Martin. But there's the other corner spot. You can always supplement. You can always add more pieces. Yep. Dan always rotated multiple safeties when he was in Dallas. So is there someone, there's like this clump of corners that a lot of people have in kind of the 30 to 45 range in their rankings. And I do believe that your rankings include that same clump of guys. Is there someone in that list that you particularly like that you think would be a good fit? Let's say outside, opposite of Lattimore, with Sainristil in the back in the nickel.
I'm a big Trey Amos guy from Ole Miss. Like I think that I think he's fantastic, man. I think he's got scheme versatility to him, but I think he also has the long arms. I think he's got the build of somebody that you want to play on the outside. And if they are going to continue to lean into that Lattimore acquisition, that Lattimore trade, well, Lattimore is good at being a man coverage guy. I know it kind of burned them a little bit during the playoff when he was going up against Mike Evans, but traditionally this is what he wants to do. He wants to be a dog and go one-on-one with somebody and play that cat coverage, if you will, where he just says, hey, don't let him catch the ball. And I think that's where he's most comfortable when he's fully healthy. Trey Amos to me is a great complement of that, as somebody who can give you that ability in man coverage on the outside as well. I think potentially, this is somebody who I think is kind of I don't know if I can say a sleeper type of a player for the Washington Commanders, but like Benjamin Morrison from Notre Dame, he went into this season.
Logan, that's one of your guys, right? Like you're big on him?
Well, I haven't done DBs specifically yet, but yeah, I do like Benjamin Morrison and the stuff I have seen of him.
I mean, so he was somebody who had a really good sophomore year, not this past year, but the year before. And he goes into this season and they're playing him a little bit more with a little bit more versatility. I think he's that press man corner type of a player, a little bit smaller of a player, but he's feisty. He plays the position so well. I've talked to people who are in the Notre Dame program who are like, yeah, I mean, this dude is just, he's very smart. He picks it up very quickly. Sam Hartman, the former quarterback for Notre Dame,
Washington practice squad, Sam Hartman.
Okay, all right, that's good. That's good. They got the good. I didn't know off the top of my head where he was.
One
right
of Jane
now,
Daniels' best friends. So
there you go.
Key member of the squad.
So he will be able to attest if they ask him about it, because he had this quote about Benjamin Morrison, and he was like, "Dude, he's just he prepares like a vet. He's so mature. Like the thing that he was so impressed with Morrison was how mature he was and how he approached the game. Morrison was a sophomore at the time. He wasn't even a junior. And so you're saying that about a true underclassman type of a player. Gets hurt this past year. He's got a hip injury, which definitely an issue, something that you got to monitor because he wasn't even able to come back even from an extended national championship run for them. But from what I have heard, the hip should be fine. You know, it was just something that it's not going to be something that he has to deal with for a long time. But he is somebody who is like, all right, because of the injury, you might not have to pick him in the first round. You might be able to get him sometime in the second round, which could be a great pull for the Commanders. But like those are a couple of guys that I'm thinking about at the very top that could make a lot of sense. I mean, Savone Revel is somebody who also makes sense, I think, from East Carolina. If you feel good about just the overall athletic ability and him being able to continue to improve in his technique and raising the floor of how he plays because he's got all the athleticism in the world that you would want from the position. But those are the guys that I feel like most commonly I think about when I think about additions at the cornerback spot for the Commanders.
And, you know, I think an interesting question coming off of that with the DB specifically is the injury history with that group. I feel like all of them are coming off of like missing significant time in their last year. So how do you kind of weigh that? How do you say, oh, they were good in 2023? I mean, it's the same thing for some of the receivers also, maybe not injury related, but Luther Burton III is a guy that jumps out to me that was really good in 23, but not so good in 24. Mm-hmm. So injury, falling production, like how do you weigh where they're at? How do you kind of mitigate that risk in your mind to say like, I'm okay with him kind of having a lackluster year in 2024. Because some of the guys you mentioned are really good football players, but not in the stuff you've seen most recently.
It's hard. A lot of it is case by case stuff. You can't really have like a cookie cutter, like, oh, okay, this guy got hurt. Now I'm going to ding him by, you know,
it's a terrible sound by Trevor. We don't, you can't give, one rule doesn't
nuance,
fit everybody.
There's nuance for this.
You have to actually do the work.
Yeah,
I wouldn't just sit here on this side of the scouting combine where the medicals are happening over there and be like, blank slate, everybody's fine.
I wouldn't draft Luther Burden, obviously. Yeah,
that's the soundbite we wanted.
You make my job easier because now I don't have to watch your tape. If you get hurt at all whatsoever, I just take you off the board, and there it is. There's my board. No, it's a case by case thing with a lot of these guys. For example, I'll start with lack of production. I look at Luther Burden, and his 2024 was definitely different from his 2023. But I feel like even in 2023, it was an offense that wasn't exactly ready to maximize everything that he brought to the table. And I think he was just a true sophomore at the time, and so he's somebody who's been one of the most athletically gifted players in any football field that he has stepped on, including the SEC. So he hasn't exactly needed to polish himself as a route runner or really take that to heart as much as he will in the NFL. 2024, the passing offense was terrible at Mizzou. Just all around. The execution, what they were asking him to do. Yeah, I think a lot of people look at the 2024 stuff for Burden and they go like, oh man, like it's just screens, it's just slants. Like this guy can't really run routes. I don't really think that was a Luther Burden thing. I think it was the offense thing. So I think context very important there. Another guy that I'll bring to the table, like a Malachi Starks from Georgia. This one is the toughest evaluation for me because I thought he was excellent, especially given his age as a true freshman and true sophomore. And then this past year, he wasn't hurt. He wasn't really doing anything different. He just wasn't as good. And I just did his full scouting report last week, and I'm watching some of these games, and he just judged things incorrectly. Like he just judged incorrectly when the football was going to get there, what the ball carrier was going to do. And so he's missing tackles and he's missing opportunities to make plays in coverage. And it's like, those are the ones that are tough because it's almost like if you had an injury,
right?
I could blame it on that.
But it's like, oh, you're not playing with Jalen Carter and those guys anymore.
And so maybe it's something like that. But at the end of the day, it was just like, he just wasn't as good this year.
Right.
And it's the truth of the matter. Like some guys they're allowed to have down years, right? You're allowed to have a down year, and that doesn't mean you're a terrible football player. You could easily bounce back the next year and things like that, but it's hard when you don't have a concrete justification of why you might have a down year, right? So that sort of goes into it.
It's worth pointing out, right? That's why the interviews here are so important because I'm a GM, I'm like, all right, so what happened this year, pal?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'd hope that he has an answer.
And they will put these guys on the whiteboard, and they will be like, all right, we're going to take a look at this play. Here's a good play that you made, and then we're going to put on a bad play, and you're going to go, okay, what happened here? Like there was was it in that Clemson game? It might have been that. No, it was in the Texas game. I remember watching that Texas game, and there was a play down the right sideline where he's got an opportunity to. Now, I believe he was in single high coverage, so it's tough, asking a guy to get from the middle of the field all the way to the sideline. But he's kind of there, like he kind of gets there athletically.
Yeah.
He just completely misjudges where the ball is at the time. He doesn't make the play, and it's just explosive down the field that he had to make up for and go make a tackle down the field. And so they're going to put that on there, and they're going to be like, "What happened here, bud?" And hopefully he's able to say, like, I just judged it wrong. Like, I thought he was throwing it more on a frozen rope than it was a little bit over the top. I wasn't ready for it to be sort of like a breadbasket over the shoulder type of a throw. I just totally judged it wrong. And that's something that, hopefully that he's got a good answer for. But we're kind of going off a tangent there. The injuries is the tough one because we don't really have the medical evaluation for these guys when they get to the combine. NFL teams do. And that's why a lot of these cases of, for example, like Johnny Newton for you guys last year.
Right.
I had Johnny Newton as a top 12 player in the class last year, and he ends up falling all the way to the second round for Washington to be able to take him there. And I'm like, man, what a steal. How in the world is Johnny Newton falling? And then sort of during the draft and after the draft, it kind of comes out. It's like, hey, he's got a foot injury that he's going to have to deal with
surgery on both feet.
Right. And so you learn those things a little bit later. And then it just comes down to, okay, well, teams didn't think that he was worth a first round pick, but Washington clearly thought he was worth a second round pick. And I think once you throw injuries into it, the range of where you could go as a prospect is just so vast.
For sure.
Yeah. Have you heard anything about Josh Simmons, speaking of injury? I mean, he's a guy that I think is a special offensive line talent, moves well, but obviously kind of a freaky injury. And just do you have any indication like where he's at? And
So I don't know where he's at in his recovery. I had heard that the initial report was people were like, yeah, he tore his ACL. I have since been told that it was worse than that it was more extensive than just tearing his ACL. I don't want to exactly say what I've been told because I don't know if that's 100% correct, but I have heard from multiple people that it might be more extensive than just an ACL tear. And even just an ACL tear is something that you have to deal with. But Simmons is somebody who I loved. I was a big fan of him. He was a top 5 tackle for me even before this year started. And then I thought he was playing some of his best ball, and he could have ended up being a top 20 pick. But he is definitely interesting as somebody that Washington obviously has got to do a lot of due diligence on, because I think it's realistic to think that he could make it to them due to that injury.
He's the guy that I know, Logan, we've talked about him on the pod already because he's like your guy in this class in terms of the offensive lineman if you take the injury side out of it. But he could be all over the place. It's always funny, too. I'm sure you get all kinds of crap on draft day. Oh, your mock drafts all over the place. Your board's all over the place. It's like, yeah, well, we now know how bad the injury was. And so that's definitely part of this as well.
Dude, Logan, I can't remember if we talked about this when we were at the Senior Bowl. Josh Simmons has that like Christian Darrisaw stance, where both those dudes can get so low at the snap that they are firing off the ball, fantastic leverage, fast footwork. They've got the feet to be able to mirror. Like, I don't think he's as strong as Christian Darrisaw, but man, it's hard to not watch him and not go like, you move so much like that guy.
No, I totally agree. I think that was my comp that I wrote down for him. And it's always hard because, like, I do this thing. Maybe you do it too, like where he's wearing 71, Christian Darrisaw wears 71. And you're like, that just goes in your mind that way. But I think the movement skills are tremendous. And so when you get a guy that moves like that playing offensive line, it's like those guys don't grow on trees. So you got to take advantage of them.
The two players that I always feel the worst about doing comps this year are Abdul Carter and Micah Parsons, because they are literally built the exact same. They're like the same. Even they even kind of like look the same. Like their face looks the same. They went to the same school. They have the same background. They wear the same number. They play the same position, and they're
should be against the rules,
right? And I always feel bad. People are like, oh, what's your comp for Abdul Carter? And I'm like, I mean, you're gonna say it's easy, but it's Micah Parsons, and then the other one is Dallas Clark for Tyler Warren.
Oh.
I genuinely like that.
Let's go to our white tight end Logan Paulsen.
And they both wear 44, so I feel bad about it. So I feel like I gotta.
Does Warren wear gloves?
Yes, but
no more comp. Not allowed.
So I was about to say the Clark comp doesn't really fly because he wears gloves. He reminds me. This is a crazy company. He reminds me of like Rob Gronkowski. Like, is he just that big? he's like the body type is more
huge
that way. As opposed to Dallas Clark, who was a little bit small or a little bit more receiver. I
got to know how much he parties, on the side.
That's the thing.
Because that's the Gronk comp. I can't give anybody the Gronk comp unless, you spend a night out with him.
We've got in Washington the Commander's tag. Unless you party hard, you can't get the Gronk tag. Those are the rules. And you can't get the Dallas Clark tag if you wear gloves. Sorry, your game could be basically identical.
That's fair.
But you gotta. This is how drafting works.
That's fair.
All right, let's go offensive line real quick. We started talking about that. Obviously, like, where do you think the strength of this class is in terms of, like, is this a draft where you're like, I want to take a guard in the 5th round because I think there's one that could be a starter for me sooner rather than later? Is this I got to take that guy early? Like, where are the levels in the depth in this class along the offensive line?
As strange as it might be to say, like, the strength of this offensive line class is literally just in its versatility. And I think that there's a pro and a con to saying that. The pro is that, of course, I think you have a lot of guards could be centers, and I think you have a lot of tackles that could be guards, and I think you have a lot of tackles even that could be centers. And we've even had some guy like Donovan Jackson from Ohio State who did the Joe Tooney thing where he played guard and then they kicked him out to tackle when Josh Simmons got hurt. So there's just so much versatility in this offensive line class that beauty is going to be in the eyes of the beholder for basically every single team on how they see these players. Like, for example, Will Campbell. I love Will Campbell. He's my favorite offensive lineman in this class right now. I genuinely think that there's a chance where he could be an all-pro center, right? And so, like, of course, like, are you drafting a center at 4 if you're the Patriots? No, probably not. But, like, that's kind of what I think about this guy. Gray Zabel from North Dakota State played offensive tackle for the Bison. I think he'll move inside to center. I think center's his best position there. But to me, it's getting one of those guys that, okay, maybe they are not those, like, easy plug and play, which is a phrase that I kind of hate anyways, long-term starters along the offensive line. But it's those guys where, I don't know, we might have a handful of Elijah Vera Tuckers in this class, guys who can start at one position, maybe start on the inside, but if you need him to kick out the tackle, you could do that. I think Kelvin Banks is somebody who fits that bill. I think Armand Membu could do that. I think that Will Campbell could do that, right? And I'm just sort of naming off the guys that are at the very top of my head that are at the top of this class. So versatility, to me, is the strength of this offensive line class. And I think that you'll be able to get a guy that you really want because, again, just with so many different projections of where teams might have these certain players, one of these guys is going to fall to you in at the first or second round that I think you're going to have an opportunity to pick.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a lot of really good interior players, and I like what you said there about Will Campbell. I do think, depending on how he measures, like, that's going to be a big part of the equation for him. But the one thing I'd ask you is, if you had to find a tackle, someone that you said, this guy's going to play tackle in the NFL, left or right, I don't care, who's the first, or maybe first 2 names that come to mind there?
Ozzie Trapillo from Boston College is the first guy that I think of. I mean, no question about it. Has the size, has the length. He's been playing right tackle for Boston College for years. I believe his dad played offensive line in the NFL. So, I mean, like, he's just got the bloodlines to him. He plays for a program that's very traditionally been able to send trench guys to the NFL that are very familiar with what it's like to be able to play in the pros from Boston College and then making that jump. So he is the first guy that I think of that when you think about, okay, this guy is an offensive tackle no matter what, he's the first guy that I think of there.
And just for the audience, like, where is he ranked on your big board approximately? Because to me, he's like a 3rd round type of guy, but just to, like, it's more like to give context on the draft class, right?
Yeah.
Those elite outside players are not super thick in this group is what I'm
Yes, I would have him anywhere from late 2nd, early 3rd. I think is a great range for Ozzie, who I think just a little bit of limited foot speed is probably the reason why you wouldn't think of him a little bit higher, but somebody who genuinely, I think that you could put him at offensive tackle and there's a world where he is, okay, maybe not the franchise tackle for you, maybe not a Tristan Wirfs or a Penei Sewell or something like that, but like you go, because I mean, for every Tristan Wirfs or Penei Sewell or whoever it is on one side of the line, you do need another offensive tackle. Right. He just doesn't get talked about nearly as much. Right. And I think that Ozzie could be that guy who's the starter on the other side.
Well, I think that's an interesting thing from the Washington lens because you have maybe that guy already in Brandon Coleman, unless you think he can kick inside and be like elite at guard. And that's, I think, one of the things that they're figuring out this offseason. All right, last thing, at least for me, but I got 2 questions that I'm asking all the draft guys. The one I already asked you, and then I love doing this every year. And you're actually, I think, the inspiration of why I have to ask everybody because you get really excited for this question.
Okay.
who's your guy in this draft? The guy that you can flip on the tape and be like, I can watch that guy all day.
I feel like I have a lot in this class they're so much fun. I'm trying to give you a little bit more of a deeper pull. RJ Harvey, the running back from UCF, is dude. The missed tackles forced per attempt. This is why I love Bucky Irving last year, because the contact balance that Bucky Irving played with, and then just the ability to make you miss in a phone booth. If it is just you and a linebacker and you got to get out of a phone booth style situation, he can make you miss in such short situations. I just love the playmaking mentality that he has to set defenders up and make a miss and get yards after contact. And I felt like he was underutilized. I shouldn't say underutilized. They actually started to use him quite a bit this past year at UCF. But I just think that he's such a great talent. He's got soft hands in the receiving game too. So he's the first guy that popped into my head that it's like, okay, this is one of my guys here in this class. This is my kind of like, I get Bucky Irving. Like this year's sort of Bucky Irving bet that I am willing to make from this running back.
Well, this wasn't like a later pull necessarily, but you remember who your guy was last year?
Oh, who was it?
Kenyon. Good call.
Oh, yeah.
Good call.
You know what?
We were sitting in this
I'm not
room
bad at
last
this.
year.
I'm not bad at
and,
this.
I was like, who's your guy? You're like, dude, Kenyon Mitchell. I could watch him play football all day long.
My guy's the best corner in the class.
But like, he was a guy out of Toledo.
No, don't. Trevor, don't let him give you these flowers.
You know where I'll actually take the flowers?
Okay, take it.
I had Cooper CB1 last year.
I'll give you that because I
had DG and
CB1.
I had him 8 overall. And he went second round, and I went, what are we doing? And then obviously, look, he goes to a phenomenal defense where everything around him is fantastic. Quignon's obviously one of those guys that was great. But I think that guys like Brian Branch, Mikey Samerstill, Cooper DeJean, they are going to force the NFL to look at the nickel defender position differently. Because how in the world are these players?
Everyone's in 11 all the time. It's a starter. Why are we downgrading the nickel player?
But here's the thing. Not only is it a starter, that is a massive difference-making chess piece position when you get the right guy. How did the NFL watch Brian Branch at Alabama and went, yeah, I don't know, second round guy? What are we doing? How do you watch that with Cooper DeJean? Look at all the ball production that he had, the returner production that he had, the tackler that he is. Be able to play on the outside and inside. That is the area where I am the most confused, or at least I have the difference of sort of ranking premium positions. The nickel defender right now, I feel like is just undervalued at the NFL position, at the NFL level. And I wonder if a guy like a hot name this year is going to be Nicky Manwari, the safety from South Carolina. Just massive build, incredible athlete, can play linebacker, can play safety, can play a little apex defender for you in the slot. I wonder if the NFL just overcompensate seems like an insult, but like almost like overcompensates that and is like, okay, we're going to draft this guy in the top 20 because I've seen that, and that's a little rich for my blood. But I wonder if
he's probably going to test like a freak.
He is. He's like 6'3", 225, and I mean he's going to be a monster this year.
All right, that's what we got with Trevor Sikkema, Pro Football Focus. Logan, do you want to do the plug again since it's one of your favorite shows?
NFL Stock Exchange podcast, man. Great job there. All the information you could possibly want about the draft in that show.
King.
There you go.
Thank you.
So check out Trevor there and everything that PFF's doing. We look forward to the post combine mock draft simulator updates.
There he is.
When the software refreshes, because we definitely use PFF's mock draft simulator for our mock drafts.
It will be a massive update after this week.
Yeah.
Like when we get to see all the testing numbers and everything like that, and there's a handful of position groups that I've gotten to that I've got final evals for. I mean, it's going to be a big change, and we're going to update a lot of stuff on the mock draft sim. So
once that's done, you let us know, and we'll do mock draft 2.0.
I will.
And not a moment before. Trevor Sikkema, everybody. Logan and I have more from Indy over the course of the rest of the week. Thanks for listening to Take Command. Thanks for watching this clip of Take Command, which has a brand new home.
That's right. You can watch on YouTube at the Team 980.
You can also listen to full episodes in the free Odyssey app, which is now enabled with Apple CarPlay. So we'll just, follow you around.